Hello, everyone. You are listening to the C Squared podcast with Corey and Curtis. Today, our special guest is Albert Mudrian of Decibel Magazine. We're really excited to have him. Got an impressive career in the metal music journalism world, so he's going to be dropping massive knowledge bombs for y'all. But first, I do want to just say thank you for being here today. We're really happy to have you.
Hey, my pleasure. I appreciate you guys asking me to do this.
Oh, yeah. And we'll do our best not to go completely off the rails. I make no guarantees. It is kind of one of our things, but
Yep. I've never participated in a podcast that has remained on the rails, so it's totally fine.
I think it's kind of against the rules to be a podcast and not have it go slightly off the rails. But before we go too horribly off the rails, I always like to have everybody just give kind of a brief breakdown of who they are and what they do. And honestly, if people aren't aware of who you are, they're probably living under a rock. But just in case somebody really isn't familiar with who you are and what you do, why don't you just give like the nutshell version?
Sure. My name is Albert. I'm the editor-in-chief and founder of Decibel Magazine, which I started back in the summer of 2004. 2004, yeah. So it's 17 years we've been going. We just celebrated our 200th issue, and we'll be sending our 203rd issue to print way too soon now that I think about it. But yeah, so I've been running that the entire time. Previous to that, I authored a book on the history of death metal and grindcore called Choosing Death, which has been revised and edited and expanded a couple times over the years. I think the most recent version came out in 2016 on a bazillion points. What else? I'm a co-founder of Decibel Magazine Tour, which will return in 2022, and the founder of Decibel's Metal and Beer Festivals, which are bi-coastal. We do one in Philadelphia and one in Los Angeles annually again, hopefully. And also in charge of the Decibel Flexi series and Decibel Books, which publishes original books on extreme music. Sometimes they're authoritative histories on specific scenes. Sometimes they are biographies of important extreme metal bands. Sometimes they are graphic novels about Rob Halford. So they vary quite a bit. There's probably other things I'm forgetting, but that's the nutshell version.
Just a little bit, just a little nut.
It's like a coconut sized nut.
Yeah. So Corey, you want to take over?
Sure. You look like you had a follow up, but I will continue.
I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna let you go. Go.
Okay. Well then, let's just start with like the history of Decibel. You started touching on it a bit with, it was founded in 2004. What made you want to start Decibel when you did?
I honestly, it was out of fandom and the fact that I didn't think there was a magazine in the North American market that was writing about metal the way I wanted to read about metal. I grew up on stuff like Metal Maniacs in the early 90s, and then Terrorizer magazine in the mid 90s was hugely influential to me when Nick Terry was the editor there. It was really a magazine I thought that had like a lot of personality and humor, and it would be irreverent at times, but it also knew, it had a voice that it was clear they knew what they were talking about. So you can kind of get away with that. It wasn't as self-aware as I wanted a magazine to be. Like I kind of wanted to see that get pushed a little further. So that was one of the things with Decibel. When I started it, I really just felt that there was this void in the US in particular, because I mean, for as much as I loved Metal Maniacs, visually it kind of looked not so hot.
It looked horrible. I'm just gonna say it right now. It fucking looked horrible, but I loved that magazine.
Yeah, I loved it too. And honestly, by the end, those fucking gradients were a part of the charm, I think.
Yeah.
But it was it was not a visually appealing magazine, and so I guess the short version is I always felt like whatever magazine was in the American market, there was always something about it that was off, whether it was like the writing or the tone or the artists that were being covered or the presentation or the layout or the design. I never felt like it all came together, and to me there was an opportunity that I saw that I wanted to take that I wanted to see if I could harness it. And fortunately, I had been writing for years prior to authoring Choosing Death, which I think I started maybe 2001, 2002.
Wow.
So I had experience writing, and I had contacts, and then working on that book provided a whole nother level of contacts within the industry. So there was this base to really build something out of. So I was able, Choosing Death had come out recently, or people knew it was coming out. The Feral House had announced its publication at the time. So when I was able to approach a record label, they knew who I was, and they knew that I had actually, gotten a couple things done. So when I said we're going to do a magazine, they believed me. So I was able to kind of generate interest and support from labels really early on in the process. So it was definitely a struggle, finding our feet and figuring out everything that comes with doing a magazine, whether it's distribution or, actually having to sell something like subscriptions and back issues and fulfillment and just everything that went into that landscape back in 2004. But it was a trial and error experience. And fortunately, I think we came out at a time when you could still launch a magazine, probably right at the tail end of that period, honestly. So yeah, so it was honestly just out of fandom. I hoped it would work. And it I guess it has.
Cool. So I had a little bit of a follow-up question just in regards to the starting of the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
So how long did it actually take from idea to launch of the actual magazine?
I mean, I think it was honestly gestating for years.
Mm-hmm.
And not in a lot of ways the same way that like Choosing Death was. Like I had done a piece on Earache Records' Immortalized box set back in 2000, which was like this weird paint can box set where Earache were celebrating some weird non-anniversary of like being around for 14 years or something. And I ended up writing this article where I interviewed Digby Pearson, who started Earache, and I was starting to get all these stories, and I talked to some other bands that had been on the label. And I'm 45, so a lot of those early Earache bands like Carcass and Napalm Death and Entombed and Morbid Angel, they meant the world to me and shaped my whole my whole taste in terms of heavy metal and extreme metal. So it rekindled that interest, but I was hesitant to take the dive into a book and put it off for a bit. And I think the same was kind of true with Decibel, where it was something that was in my head, but you worry that you can pull it off, and it also had to do with my work situation. The publisher that publishes Decibel is Red Flag Media out of Philadelphia. I have worked for the company for 25 years. We used to do free in-store music magazines for independent record chains in North America. So I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember Pulse magazine at Tower.
Yep.
This was like that, except for like independent record stores in regions throughout the country. So I did that for years. I edited and ran those magazines. They were like general audience magazines, but I would shoehorn metal coverage into them. But what that did, it gave me experience putting together a magazine and being an editor. And as far as from a business side of things, the way the music industry was changing and the way that brick and mortar record stores were, by 2003, 2004, it was clear that it was going to be trouble for them going forward.
Yeah.
Our publisher, I had made the case about kind of trying to evolve the business, and like knowing that the writing was on the wall for those magazines in a way. My pitch to say, look, let's start a newsstand publication. Let's get out there. Let's get out of being under, basically being tied to these record chains. Like whether we live or die is going to depend on whether these record chains survive. If we go out on our own, we have a chance to kind of like carve our own path with something, and that was appealing to him. So as we saw kind of the record chains going this way, and I was getting more and more confident about what I could do with an extreme heavy metal magazine, just like we were able to kind of meet and get it off the ground in the summer of 2004. But I would think we were talking about it as early as late 2002.
Oh, wow. So we're talking like a 2-year from idea to, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe from loose concept, I would say that where really, really started rolling would probably be fall of 2003. So I would say probably more like a 12 to 9 month, are we going to do this? Are we not going to do this kind of thing?
Fair enough. Before Corey asks the next question, I wanted to just kind of put it out there for people. Like, how long does it take for an actual issue of the magazine to be written and ready for publication on average?
Depends on the content. And it also kind of depends on the time of year. Like, is it a heavy release schedule? If it's a heavy release schedule, your page count's going to go up. Are you, for us, we obviously editorialize some of our events that we're promoting. So it's like, is this an issue that's tied to Metal and Beer Fest? If it is, there's going to be, we got to write about all these bands and all these breweries that are participating in it. It's a monthly magazine, and obviously, like we're in production on 2000 issue 2000, issue 200, issue 203. But we're also, there's assignments that are underway and coming together for 2000 or 200 issue 204. And it honestly, it more or less, it takes a month.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll let Corey go on for the next one.
Okay, yeah. So while you were talking about the history of Decibel, you mentioned that, back when it became apparent that record stores were in trouble. I mean, we've had the same kind of upheaval in print media, especially obviously with, blogs and the internet and everything like that. How has Decibel been able to continue with the, level of success that you guys have had with the transformation from the paper format to the more digital format?
I think it's two things, maybe three. I think the first being that, we're essentially a niche publication, and we didn't have these aspirations to, print like 1 million magazines a month and be on every newsstand everywhere, be in every bus station and every 7-Eleven on earth, because we knew that it's an extreme heavy metal magazine, and that's a niche audience, and the audience is very passionate, but it's there's a very clear ceiling and cap to how many people would be interested in that. And when you have that, I think that like you don't have like one big advertiser that's like kind of keeping you afloat, like you're not like trying to sell to Coke or Pepsi and hoping they keep writing giant checks every month. You end up working and kind of creating a strong bond with a a tight core of advertisers. And I think that that's been, I think that's been important. I think the fact that we've had a really consistent voice throughout. We haven't had any big rebrands or anything. Like, you can go back to Decibel issue #1 and look at, issue 202, which just came out, and there's a red line that really runs clearly between those 202 issues. And I think that when you do that, you create an audience that understands that you're not going to sell them out, and is going to stick by you. So you end up having kind of a dedicated core that is on board with what you're doing. I think that's helped. And I think, maybe from a financial aspect, most importantly, is the multiple revenue streams that Decibel has.
Mhm.
Because, we are a magazine, but we do a tour, we do multiple festivals, we publish books, we have a website. We're doing, vinyl variants of popular records. We're going to be, honestly, I would think within the next 6 months, we'll probably start our own small record label also to release stuff, So like, we have all of these different ways to generate revenue if, like, ad sales are down 1 month, if there just happens to be a pandemic and people stop releasing records, we are able to pivot and, publish an extra book that maybe wasn't on the schedule a few months ago, like, so we have the ability to do a bunch of different things which can generate revenue. But they're all things that I think they make a lot of sense. I think they all clearly go together, and I don't think anybody looks at any of them and thinks, oh, you're just doing that to make money. And yes, they're profitable, but the whole idea is to do stuff that you want to do, that your audience wants as well. So I think that's that's another part of the reason it works. I'm going to open a window real quick here, by the way. Excuse me.
You need to do.
All right, more air. There needs to be some air in this room. Anyway,
Nope.
sorry.
Corey, you were gonna
Definitely.
you were gonna ask the follow-up, correct?
Oh yeah, I was. So actually, it's kind of a little bit of a tangent, but not at the same time. I know you guys are super diversified and you have all of these different things going on, but in the metal community in particular, there's kind of this nostalgic clinging to, like, the older formats of things like vinyl and cassette, being, vinyl outselling CDs and everything like that. Do you think that helps keep print media alive, that same kind of mentality of wanting to have those more, and it feels weird saying old school physical formats of things when it comes to something like a magazine? It feels super weird saying that, but do you think that kind of mentality applies to the keeping the print aspect alive?
I think so. I think there's that with, metalheads are collectors, and collectors, they don't collect NFTs. Those are things, right? Like, like they don't, that's not
No, we don't like those digital things.
no. So it's like, you want these corporeal physical items, and there's something I think that's personal and genuine about them that you don't get from scrolling through something, even scrolling through the magazine on a tablet or a phone. It's not the same. And I mean, we're available on digital platforms, but at the same time, like, we've been available on them for over a decade, and I've literally never seen what the magazine looks like on them. I just know that it's an option for people who that's the way they want to consume that media. But for us, like, what we're driven by is that I don't know if it's a nostalgia as much as it's just this part of what makes you happy and who you are, as somebody who wants to own and collect and experience some physical media. And don't get me wrong, there is a nostalgic aspect to some of the things that we do, clearly, but I think that we're kind of presenting them in maybe more of an historical format, whether that's like something like the Hall of Fame, which allows us to spend 7 pages talking about like a 25-year-old record, but we're at least telling the story of it and trying to create an authoritative history of it and reveal some interesting information about it that wasn't previously available. And again, that's not to say that we don't do things that are essentially archaic, like the Decibel Flexi series. Like I mean, in its core, at its core, it's kind of ridiculous that like we found somebody to print flexis 10, 11 years ago and we're still doing it. But there's an interest and there's demand, and it's just what we do, and like we like it, our readers like it, the bands like it. There's clearly a market for it if it's something that you've done 11 years, and like I think I just sent our 130th flexi to print. So I mean, it's a lot of stuff, and and again, not to just keep going, but like even with Metal and Beer Fest and doing these sets of bands playing classic records or bands reforming to play, or whatever bands doing a specific set from a specific period. But I think it's all like I think it's that mix of Decibel of like understanding the past and celebrating it, but also at the same time kind of looking forward. And I think you can really see that with like, the bands that we put on the cover. There's a lot of younger artists that get covers of Decibel, that get their first covers anywhere, nationally or internationally. That bands that nobody else would put on the cover, that maybe only have 1 or 2 albums, but we're excited about and passionate about and think that they'll have a long career and a real future. And those are the kind of bands that'll be openers on the Decibel tour, or get like a spot you might not expect them to get at a Metal and Beer Fest. And just trying to move everything down the line, because if you're a young band in 2021, you don't have a lot of tools to kind of get yourself out there. You have the internet, and that's it. Like there's no radio, there's no TV, there's no street teams anymore. There's no, like, half of the bands don't even have like legitimate label support. So for us, like, we have all these platforms that the bands can work with and utilize, and we can help kind of push them out there in different ways, and to kind of a larger audience to help them develop. And it's something we're conscious of. We want to see these bands get bigger. We want there to be growth. I don't want there to just be like the same like dozen bands that could headline a Decibel tour for the next 10 years. I want there to be new bands. I want bands that were, first or second on one of our bills 10 years ago to be able to be a headliner 10 years down the road. I think that stuff is important. And I think that if we're cognizant of it and we're getting behind the right bands and bands that we believe in and bands that are going to produce, then you can have a hand in making that happen.
I want to ask you something, Albert. It's a little bit off topic, but kind of not, but kind of is at the same time. So how do you guys pick the bands on the fest and the tour? Do you get pitched, or do you guys ask? How does it work?
I curate the lineup for the festivals.
Okay.
So I reach out to either bands directly or their booking agents, and I try to find a mix of things that I think are compelling and interesting. With the Decibel tour, I have a partner who's a longtime booking agent named Nick Storch, and he and I work together on developing a lineup And that it's like, it really is kind of a split 50-50 between kind of our tastes and our visions. And we've been doing it since we started working on it together in 2011. So
Nice.
it's, it's been 10 years we've been together doing it. And like, I can't imagine doing it without him. And hopefully that's reciprocated on his end. But that is, that's more of a collaborative thing. But the fests in Philly and in LA, that's just me trying to put together a lineup. And it's the same thing with the beers and the brewery selections. I mean, we do get more breweries who are like, hey, we'd love to be part of this. And like, whenever we announce an event, like you get inundated with new breweries that you were unaware of that just kind of popped up, and they're like, we love this event, or we are metalheads and we would love to participate if you'd have us. And so part of it with that stuff is just having an established event where people can kind of come to you. And the truth is, I do, obviously I know agents and bands, and they will occasionally like be like, hey, if you ever want us for Metal and Beer Fest or ever want us for the tour, keep us in mind. So it's a lot of times like, it's like an idea that gets planted one year, and then a couple years later down the line, you're thinking about it and you're like, oh, that could work for the way this lineup is coming together.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say it's like I do all of it myself, but like that certainly has an impact.
Cool. Awesome. Corey, you want to go to the next one?
Yeah. So switching gears a bit away from like the events and the tours, say somebody is wanting to get involved with Decibel, how do you typically find your writers? Do you find them, do they come to you, or do you tend to go to them like you do with the bands?
I would say that more recently it's kind of a 50-50 thing, where truth be told, I don't spend a ton of time scouring sites or reading other magazines looking for talent. It's one of those things where you just kind of find it in the strangest places. Like, and there's one of our writers, a guy by the name of Forrest Pitts, who is a subscriber, and wrote, like, he was complaining about something. He wanted to write a letter. He wrote a letter complaining about something, but he did it in such a funny, engaging, artful way. I was like, have you ever thought about writing, man? I was like, the letter was just thoroughly entertaining. And he was like, he's like, I used to do some stuff in college. And I was like, why don't you write a review of this record? Let's see what happens. And this was probably 5-6 years ago, and he's still like, he's a monthly staff writer. And then I've tried that trick with other people and it didn't work. So it's sometimes you just kind of catch lightning in the bottle with that. Sometimes you will, like somebody who is a writer or a contributor to another publication who wants to start doing other stuff or is leaving a publication will reach out and you're like, yeah, let's do this, let's give it a shot. And one of our newer contributors, Courtney Eisman, a friend of mine tipped me off to her beer writing, and it was also clear that she was a metalhead, and I was just like, oh man, like I was like, her beer writing is great. Let me, let me reach out to her and see if she'd be down, and she was, and she ended up becoming like she ended up taking over our monthly beer column in the magazine, in addition to contributing reviews and features as well on death metal bands fairly regularly too. So I don't think there's, at this point, after 17 years, that there's one dominant thing that happens in that process. It really just is kind of a mix at this point. I mean, I get plenty of requests from people who are kind of green, who want to write, and that's cool, and no one should ever feel like they're not ready. Everybody, if they feel like they're ready, they should reach out. but they should also understand that that we might not think they're ready.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing wrong with that. We don't have a ton of contributors. Ultimately, we try to keep it pretty tight and not to not to be elitist, but to just like keep the quality control high.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's tough to crack. We don't accept accept unsolicited material. Like, you'll get the occasional, oh, I've got this piece ready to go, and you'll be like, okay, like, that's not how we do things. So it's hard, man. Like I remember when I was just a freelancer back in the 90s, writing to Terrorizer, trying to write for the magazine, writing to Metal Maniacs, trying to get in. I never heard anything back.
Yeah.
I never heard a goddamn thing. So
Yeah.
I know it's not easy, and I understand. And I do my best to try to be cool and encouraging, and I don't always get to everybody, but it's it's tough, is what I would say. It's tough.
So we're going to move along onto pitching now. So what do you like to see when someone pitches you to review or whatever for either the print or the digital?
I don't get many pitches at this point.
Yeah. Fair
it,
enough.
I get, because like all of our, like I said, I don't accept unsolicited solicitations. I don't accept unsolicited writings. So it
No, I
would,
mean like for
if one of
reviews.
our staff members,
Yeah.
like, I mean, honestly, it's just like they kind of know, most of them kind of know my tastes.
Mm.
So what's cool is they know they don't have to pitch things that I like. They're pitching things that maybe they think I'm, too stupid to know about. uh,
That's awesome.
which is cool, because it's true. Like, there's plenty of blind spots, because, I don't like everything that's in the magazine. I'm of a certain, and not that I haven't tried, or that I'm, actively against it. It's just not my thing. And I'm honest with myself, and a number of our writers recognize it. And some of them I've told, there's a guy, Bradley Zordrager, who, he contributes some stuff to the site and to the print magazine now and again. And he really likes deathcore. And I'm just like, dude, I can't tell any of this shit apart. And like, I was like, every once in a while, there'll be one, I was like, maybe I'll hear a band that is like deathcore with Dimmu Borgir keyboards, and somehow even worse than just regular deathcore. But if you think it's good, and I trust your take on this stuff, and you think that this is like a band in the genre that deserves attention, go for it. And I think that's probably where a lot of the pitches that I wouldn't normally assign come from. Like, there's some new Peaceville style death doom band. I'm probably going to hear that. I'm probably going to seek that out. And if one of our writers who knows me is like, hey, you should hear this, and I'll listen to it, and then they'll be like, yeah, go write about that. But it's really, I think, the stuff that is not in my wheelhouse that I'm generally more interested in hearing pitches on.
Fair enough. So you kind of give people like free reign to write about what they want, basically, on the site, then, is what you're saying.
The site is a little different. The site is like kind of heavily driven by track premieres.
Yeah.
And I have to, there are certain writers that I'm just like, you know what, fill this spot on this day. I trust you to recognize what is worth writing about and what isn't. And then there are publicists or labels or bands that'll pitch me, and then I'll have to assign them out to kind of keep it rolling. And the magazine, obviously, it's a bit different, because you do want to you do want to hear all of that stuff and know everything that's like I want to hear every record that's being reviewed. There are things that pop up on the site, like a track premiere of a band, and like it, it's my first time hearing that band as that as that comes up. But that doesn't happen with the magazine. But the website's a different animal.
Yeah.
And so so that's a mix of occasionally me having an idea of a concept or a series that we could do, but then the track premieres is a lot more of the pitches directly to the contributors or to me that I farm out to the contributors, because we're not a news site,
Yeah.
and that's not something that I'm ever interested in getting involved in. I don't want to get in those click wars. I see what happens. It's ugly. Bad things happen. We don't need to do that. All of the sites, and no disrespect to anyone, because I have a lot of friends at many of them, but you scroll through one, you scroll through another, and it's the same fucking article over and over and over and over and over again. And why should I, why do that? Why dilute it? In trying to say this in the least gross way possible, Decibel is a brand, and once you start doing shit like that, you dilute the brand. I think it doesn't seem special anymore. It's just kind of this, you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, and I don't want to do that. So I would much rather have some obscure artist that you're working that gets the track premiere than the update on Marilyn Manson. And I know which one is going to get more clicks, but I don't give a shit. I don't, I'm, to me, it's, there's a long game, and that long game is understanding what you are, what you're there for. People aren't coming to us to learn about those things anyway,
Yep. No, totally understand that. Last question, just on the pitching or the writing aspect before Corey does the next question. You listen to every album that goes into the magazine personally? Really?
I mean, I'll check it. I might not go start to finish, but
okay.
I will definitely listen to everything that how else could you, there are so many records that are released in a month now.
I know, that's why I'm asking. How do you do it?
Well, you might spend a minute on one before you're yeah, we don't need to review that or write about that. But if something comes in and I think it's it's pretty clear what is print appropriate and what isn't at this point for me. And I don't know. Obviously don't get me wrong, there's tons of things that we miss and can't get to, and obviously with the emergence of Bandcamp, there's a lot of things that are worth covering that just maybe don't get to us at the time of release, that maybe we catch up with later, or we get to it on the site and maybe we never really get to it in the magazine until the artist has more of a traditional label relationship, or they have so much steam as a result of what they've done digitally that we could do a feature on them later on in that album cycle, even though it's not really a traditional cycle with the whole Bandcamp thing. So there, I try to hear as much as I can. Again, maybe not all of it, maybe not start to finish. But I think it's important to know,
Yep. No, I agree. Corey, you want to ask a final question because we're running low on time?
Yeah, definitely. So for those who are aspiring to be, a writer or get into metal journalism or journalism really of any kind, or even what you said with the book writing and everything like that, what are your top pieces of advice for aspiring writers who want to get into the industry?
Don't worry about feedback. Just keep writing. Don't continually ask people for feedback. Just keep writing. Write, and this might sound ridiculous, but just try to start writing just like you speak, like you converse. Try to be natural. If you don't shy away from humor ever, even if they're like the worst dick jokes on earth, just put them in there for now. Somebody who knows better will take them out at some point. But like, I think what I look for, honestly, more than anything is personality. And somebody can be authoritative and have zero personality, and it just kind of reads like a band bio. And there's some people who could be like, have a ton of personality, but they, maybe they're fast and loose with facts, and they're sloppy with knowing what label released what record, or what year it came out, or where the accent goes in this guy's last name from band X.
Yep.
Those are things I can fix. I can't inject, I can't inject the personality into the reviews. That has to kind of come, or from the editorial. That kind of has to come from them. So I would just like encourage people to just be themselves, not be super clinical about things. That stuff will just come naturally the more you write too. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's helpful or useful, unfortunately, but like that, as far as the writing that I want to read somebody who like, I want to read somebody whose review, like after I've read their review or read their interview, I would actually feel good about hanging out with that person, if that that makes any sense. Whereas like if you're reading something that's like really kind of just presenting the facts, it might be tough to kind of to make that connection. And I think that kind of just goes into the magazine's voice. And again, not everybody has, I mean, some writers have too much personality. Don't get me wrong. Like some things need to get rolled back at times. And then some people are slightly more tenured, but it's that balance. But I think you need to kind of go overboard first before you can kind of rein yourself back in.
Totally. Corey, do you got anything else for Albert?
I think I'm good on my end. We've given people a lot of information to digest today.
I agree. Albert, you want to quickly go over the Metal and Beer Fest, since we didn't give you an opportunity and I just remembered?
Oh, sure. The Philadelphia edition of Metal and Beer Fest is returning September 25th and 26th at the Fillmore, Philly. We have special sets from Napalm Death doing selections from their Harmony Corruption and Utopia Banished albums. We have Converge doing all of Jane Doe, and Pig Destroyer doing their classic Prowler on the Yard album in its entirety. We have Dead Guy reuniting. We have a bunch of other awesome bands: Immolation, Municipal Waste, Imperial Triumphant, Blood Incantation, Midnight. There's all kinds of awesome shit. And 20 amazing breweries that'll be pouring for people who have purchased special tickets that give you access to those. Those tickets are sold out. And then general tickets that just get you in the door are about to sell out. As of this afternoon, there were 41 tickets left for the Saturday of the event, and I think about 180 left for the Sunday.
Wow.
And the show is 3 months from today, so if you were planning to get them at doors, I would rethink that strategy. And then we'll be doing our LA edition that'll return this year also. That's going to be at the end of the year. We'll reveal the venue, the dates, the full lineup about a month from now, towards the end of July.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you for coming on, Albert. And with that, I'm going to say party on, Corey.
Party on, Curtis. Party on, Albert.
Party on, everyone.